Emma Richardson stared at her reflection in the hotel suite's ornate bathroom mirror, her trembling fingers adjusting the plastic tiara her friends had insisted she wear. 24 hours from now, she'd be Mrs. Emma Whitfield. The thought sent a flutter of nerves through her stomach that had nothing to do with the 3 glasses of champagne she'd already consumed. Get your bridal butt out here." Melissa, her maid of honor since kindergarten, pounded on the door. "The entertainment has arrived." Emma rolled her eyes but couldn't help smiling. Her friends had been mysterious about tonight's special performance, and she'd reluctantly agreed, making them promise nothing too outrageous. The last thing she needed was some scandal the night before marrying into one of Boston's most prestigious families. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door to find her 5 bridesmaids gathered in a semicircle around the suite's main room, giggling like teenagers. The furniture had been pushed aside to create a makeshift stage area. "Ladies and, well, just ladies," announced Melissa, raising her champagne flute dramatically. "I present to you, for one night only, the magnificent Adonis." The hotel room door swung open on cue, and in walked a man who could only be described as sculpted perfection. Tall and athletic, with skin the color of polished mahogany, he wore a bow tie, dress shirt cuffs, and what appeared to be tear-away pants. His smile was dazzling as he surveyed the room of squealing women. "I hear someone's getting married tomorrow," he said, his voice deep and melodic. His eyes found Emma, taking in her tiara and bride-to-be sash with amusement. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. This wasn't her scene at all. James, her fiancé, would absolutely disapprove. The thought of his disapproval suddenly irritated her. Why shouldn't she have one last night of harmless fun? "That would be me," she said, straightening her shoulders and accepting the fresh glass of champagne Melissa thrust into her hand. Adonis, clearly not his real name, smiled. "Then this is your special night." As music began to play from someone's portable speaker, Emma let herself be guided to the center chair. This wasn't how she'd imagined spending her bachelorette party. She'd envisioned a sophisticated dinner, perhaps a wine tasting, something befitting the future wife of James Whitfield IV. Instead, here she was, watching as a stranger began to dance for her and her friends' entertainment. But as the night progressed and the champagne flowed freely, Emma found herself relaxing, even enjoying the absurdity of it all. The dancer, who eventually introduced himself as Marcus, was surprisingly charming and respectful, keeping the performance tasteful despite her friends' increasingly rowdy encouragement. Hours later, when her friends had passed out across the suite's various surfaces, Emma found herself on the balcony, sharing a surprisingly deep conversation with Marcus. "So, big day tomorrow," he said, leaning against the railing. He'd long since put his shirt back on, and now looked almost ordinary, if you could call his movie star good looks ordinary. "Life-changing," Emma agreed, staring out at the Boston skyline. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm ready." "Cold feet?" "No, not exactly." Emma hesitated. She'd never voiced these thoughts to anyone, not even Melissa. More like wondering if I'm marrying James or marrying what he represents. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "And what does he represent?" "Security, tradition, my parents' approval." She laughed hollowly. "God, that sounds terrible, doesn't it?" "It sounds human," Marcus replied. "We all make choices based on what we think will bring us safety or happiness." "What about you?" Emma asked, suddenly curious about this stranger who'd seen her at her most uninhibited. "What choices brought you to this career?" Marcus smiled. "I'm a graduate student in psychology. This is just paying the bills until I finish my dissertation." Emma blinked in surprise. "Psychology? What's your focus?" "The masks we wear in different social contexts," he said, his eyes holding hers with unexpected intensity. "How we present different versions of ourselves depending on who's watching." Something in his words resonated with her uncomfortably. Hadn't she been wearing masks her entire life? The perfect daughter, the appropriate girlfriend, the suitable fiancée. "I should probably get some sleep," she said suddenly, feeling exposed. Marcus nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Big day tomorrow." As she turned to go, he caught her hand gently. "Emma, whoever you choose to be tomorrow and beyond, make sure it's someone you can live with." She pulled her hand away, unsettled by his insight. "It was nice meeting you, Marcus." "You too, Emma Richardson. Or should I say, the future Mrs. Whitfield." His words followed her as she slipped back into the suite, stepping carefully over her sleeping friends. As she curled up on the king-sized bed, Emma told herself the uneasiness she felt was just pre-wedding jitters, nothing more. But in the darkness of the hotel room, with the weight of tomorrow pressing down on her, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just experienced something significant, a moment of truth, with a stranger that she couldn't have with the man she was about to marry. Chapter 2. A perfect union. The wedding was everything the society pages could have hoped for. St. Mark's Episcopal Church gleamed with tasteful floral arrangements. The guest list read like a who's who of Boston elite, and Emma's gown, a Vera Wang original, drew audible gasps as she floated down the aisle on her father's arm. If anyone noticed the dark circles under her eyes, expertly concealed by her makeup artist, they didn't mention it. If her smile seemed slightly forced as she recited her vows, it was attributed to bridal nerves. And if, for a fleeting moment during the ceremony, her eyes scanned the assembled guests as though searching for someone, no one seemed to notice. Except perhaps James, who squeezed her hand a little too tightly as they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife. "You seemed distracted," he murmured, as they posed for photographs on the church steps. "Just overwhelmed," Emma replied, fixing her smile in place. "It's a lot to take in." James nodded, satisfied with her answer. At 32, James Whitfield IV was considered Boston's most eligible bachelor until today. Handsome in a conventional way, with sandy hair and keen blue eyes, he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. He was kind in his way, and Emma had convinced herself that was enough. The reception at the Whitfield estate was equally picture-perfect. As Emma moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and making appropriate small talk, she felt as though she were watching herself from a distance. This was what she'd wanted, wasn't it? The security, the status, the approval in her mother's eyes as she clinked glasses with Beatrice Whitfield, her new mother-in-law. "You've done wonderfully, darling," her mother whispered during a rare, private moment. "The Whitfields are thrilled with you." Emma nodded, taking a sip of champagne. "I'm glad they approve. It's more than approval. You're carrying on a legacy now." Her mother straightened Emma's already perfect necklace. "Just think of the beautiful children you'll have. Those Whitfield genes are strong. All those boys with those striking blue eyes." Emma smiled automatically, but something in her mother's words nagged at her. The expectation of children, of Whitfield heirs, was implicit in this union. It wasn't that she didn't want children. She did someday. But the weight of expectation felt suddenly suffocating. Later, as she and James swayed on the dance floor for their first dance, she found herself studying his features. The straight nose, the firm jaw, those penetrating blue eyes that had initially attracted her. Would their children have his eyes? The thought triggered an unexpected memory of dark, perceptive eyes. Marcus's eyes, seeing through her facade the night before. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, noticing her distraction again. "Our future," Emma answered honestly. "Children, legacies." James smiled, pleased. "Mother was just saying the same thing. The Whitfield name needs to continue." Something in his tone, the certainty, the expectation, made Emma miss a step. "Careful," James said, steadying her. "Everyone's watching." Of course they were. Everyone was always watching. The honeymoon in the Maldives was objectively perfect. Crystal waters, white sand beaches, and a private villa that cost more per night than most people's monthly rent. James was attentive, if somewhat predictable, in bed. They snorkeled, dined on exquisite seafood, and took countless photos that would make their social media followers envious. If Emma sometimes found herself staring out at the horizon, wondering about roads not taken, she kept those thoughts to herself. This was her life now. She had made her choice. Upon their return to Boston, they settled into the renovated brownstone James had purchased in Beacon Hill, a wedding gift from his parents. Emma threw herself into decorating, joining the right charitable committees, and generally fulfilling her role as Mrs. James Whitfield IV. "We should start trying for a baby," James announced one evening, 6 months after the wedding, as they prepared for bed. "Mother was asking about our plans yesterday." Emma paused, toothbrush in hand. "Already? I thought we might wait a year or so." James frowned slightly. "Why wait? We're financially set. The house has plenty of room, and you don't have career obligations." The dismissal of her part-time art gallery work stung, but Emma knew it wasn't worth arguing about. James saw her job as a hobby, something to keep her occupied until more important duties, namely motherhood, took precedence. "I just thought we might enjoy being just us for a while longer," she said carefully. "We've been just us for 6 months," James countered, sliding into bed. "Most of our friends are already on their second kids. The Morgan's son is almost 3 now." Emma rinsed her mouth, buying time. The truth was, something had been holding her back from fully embracing their marriage, a nagging doubt, a sense of incompleteness she couldn't articulate. "You're right," she said finally, returning to the bedroom. "There's no reason to wait." James smiled, pulling back the covers on her side of the bed. "I knew you'd see reason. Mother will be thrilled." As Emma slipped into bed beside her husband, she wondered when Beatrice Whitfield's opinion had become the benchmark for their marital decisions. But she said nothing, allowing James to turn off the light and pull her close, his intentions clear. "This is what marriage is," she told herself as she responded to his touches. Compromise, growth, leaving behind youthful indecision for adult certainty. But as James moved above her with familiar rhythm, Emma closed her eyes and was startled to find another face swimming in her mind's eye. Dark, perceptive eyes, a knowing smile. The memory was so vivid, so unexpected, that she gasped aloud. "You like that?" James murmured, misinterpreting her reaction. "Yes," Emma whispered, keeping her eyes firmly closed, ashamed of her wandering thoughts, yet unable to banish them entirely. Afterward, as James slept beside her, Emma stared at the ceiling and made a decision. She would commit fully to this life, to James, to the future they were building. Whatever doubts lingered from that strange night before her wedding, she would put them firmly in the past where they belonged. Little did she know, the past wasn't finished with her yet. Chapter 3. The test. 3 months later, Emma stared at the plastic stick in her trembling hands, the double pink line unmistakable even in the harsh bathroom light. Pregnant. After weeks of tracking her cycle, taking her temperature, and enduring James's increasingly methodical approach to conception, they had succeeded. She should feel elated. This was what they'd been working toward, what the Whitfield dynasty expected of her. Instead, she felt a curious numbness, followed by a wave of guilt for not experiencing the joy she knew she should feel. "Em, you've been in there for ages." James's voice came through the bathroom door, impatient. Quickly, Emma wrapped the test in tissue and tucked it into her pocket. She wanted a moment to process before sharing the news. "Just a minute," she called, splashing cold water on her face. When she emerged, James was already dressed for work, checking his watch. "Everything okay? We have the foundation dinner tonight. Don't forget." "I haven't forgotten," Emma said, forcing a smile. 7 o'clock at the Four Seasons. James nodded, satisfied. He placed a perfunctory kiss on her cheek before grabbing his briefcase. I've got back-to-back meetings today, so I'll meet you there. After he left, Emma sank onto the edge of their perfectly made bed, finally allowing herself to process the reality. A baby. Their baby. The next generation of Whitfields. She placed a hand on her still flat stomach, trying to connect with the life growing inside her. "Hello in there," she whispered, feeling a bit foolish, but needing some acknowledgement of this momentous change. Later that day, she scheduled an appointment with her gynecologist, Dr. Stevens, who confirmed the home test results. "Congratulations, Mrs. Whitfield," she said warmly. "Based on your last period, you're about 6 weeks along. Everything looks normal so far." Emma nodded, still processing. When will we know more? About the baby, I mean." "We'll do standard genetic testing around 10 to 12 weeks, and the anatomy scan at 20 weeks will tell us much more, including the sex, if you want to know." "And when will I start showing?" Emma asked, already imagining Beatrice Whitfield's scrutiny, the ladies at the country club tracking her expanding waistline. "Every woman is different," Dr. Stevens replied. "First pregnancies often show later, maybe around 15 to 20 weeks. But let's focus on getting you through the first trimester before worrying about maternity clothes." That evening at the foundation dinner, Emma watched James from across the crowded ballroom as he charmed potential donors. She'd planned to tell him about the pregnancy tonight, perhaps during the drive home, when they could share a private moment of celebration. But as the evening wore on, she found herself holding back, savoring this knowledge that was hers alone for a little longer. "You're glowing tonight, Emma," Beatrice Whitfield said, appearing suddenly at her side. Her mother-in-law's eyes narrowed slightly as she assessed Emma's appearance. "Is there something you're not telling us?" Emma nearly choked on her sparkling water. Was she that transparent? "Just enjoying the evening," she managed to say. "The foundation is doing important work." Beatrice nodded, though her expression remained suspicious. "Indeed. James tells me you've been trying. It's good to see you looking so well." The knowledge that James discussed their private life, their attempts at conception, with his mother, made Emma's skin crawl, but she maintained her composure, years of social training coming to her rescue. "Thank you, Beatrice. James and I are very happy." Her mother-in-law patted her arm. "That's what matters, dear. The Whitfield line must continue after all." As weeks passed, Emma found herself increasingly uncomfortable with the growing attention to her condition. James had been predictably pleased with the news, immediately calling his parents and her own before Emma could stop him. Since then, it seemed everyone in their social circle was invested in her pregnancy, offering unsolicited advice and subtle scrutiny. "You're carrying so small," commented Caroline Morgan at a charity luncheon 3 months later. "With Bradford, I was enormous by 16 weeks." Emma smiled tightly, resisting the urge to place a protective hand over her slightly rounded belly. "Every pregnancy is different, I'm told." The 12-week genetic screening had gone smoothly, though Emma had opted not to learn the baby's sex, wanting at least one surprise in this meticulously planned process. James had been disappointed but hadn't pressed the issue. At 20 weeks, however, the anatomy scan revealed more than either of them anticipated. "The baby's development looks excellent," Dr. Wong, the ultrasound technician, assured them as she moved the wand across Emma's gel-coated abdomen. "Good, strong heartbeat. Spine looks great. All organs developing normally." Emma watched the grainy, black-and-white image with wonder. That was their child, an actual human being with tiny fingers and toes, a beating heart, a developing brain. "Do you want to know the sex, Doctor?" Wong asked, pausing the image. James squeezed Emma's hand. "Yes," they said in unison, though with different inflections. James is decisive, Emma's yielding. "Congratulations. You're having a boy." James's face lit up. A son! Father will be ecstatic. Emma smiled, genuinely happy to see his joy. A boy, a son, the Whitfield heir. There is one more thing, Dr. Wong said, her expression growing more serious. Your amniocentesis results contain some unexpected genetic markers. Emma's heart stuttered. Is something wrong with the baby? No, not at all, Dr. Wong assured her quickly. Your son is developing perfectly normally, but there are some genetic variations that don't align with what we would expect based on both parents' genetic backgrounds. James frowned. What does that mean exactly? The technician hesitated. It might be nothing. Genetic testing isn't perfect, but given these results, I'd like to refer you for additional testing and genetic counseling, just to be thorough. The drive home was tense, James gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. I'm sure it's nothing, Emma said, trying to soothe both him and herself. Like she said, the tests aren't perfect. My family has no history of genetic disorders, James said stiffly. We've always been remarkably healthy. Mine too, Emma replied, though less confidently. Her father had died of a heart attack at 58, and her maternal grandmother had battled breast cancer. We'll do whatever additional testing they recommend, James decided. Cost is no object when it comes to our son's health. Emma nodded, placing a hand on her belly where their son had just delivered a series of strong kicks, as though asserting his presence in this conversation about his future. The genetic counselor, Dr. Patel, was a kind-faced woman with a calm demeanor that immediately put Emma at ease. James, however, remained tense, sitting rigidly beside her, as Dr. Patel explained the previous test results and the additional testing they recommended. We're primarily looking at a more detailed genetic profile for both parents and the fetus, she explained. This will give us a clearer picture of any potential health concerns. And what about these unexpected genetic markers? James asked, his tone clipped. What exactly does that mean? Dr. Patel's expression remained neutral. Sometimes genetic testing reveals variations that don't match patterns we would typically expect based on family history and parental genetics. Most often it's simply an anomaly in the testing process or a previously unidentified genetic trait in one of the parents' backgrounds. And less often? Emma asked quietly. Dr. Patel hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Less often it can indicate non-paternity. The room fell silent. Emma felt blood rush to her face, her heart pounding in her ears. That's absurd, James said finally, his voice dangerously controlled. My wife and I have been trying to conceive for months. There's no possibility of that. Dr. Patel nodded, unruffled by his reaction. I understand, Mr. Whitfield. As I said, testing anomalies are the most common explanation. The additional testing will give us more definitive answers. On the drive home, James was silent, radiating a cold fury that Emma had rarely witnessed. When he finally spoke, his words cut through her like ice. Is there something you need to tell me, Emma? What? No! She exclaimed, genuinely shocked by the implication. James, you can't possibly think— I don't know what to think, he interrupted. We go for a routine scan and suddenly there are questions about paternity. What am I supposed to think? That the tests are wrong, Emma insisted. That's the most likely explanation according to Dr. Patel. James said nothing more, but the damage was done. A seed of doubt had been planted, and Emma could see it taking root in his mind. The worst part was, she couldn't entirely blame him, because in the darkest corners of her own mind, a memory stirred, a hotel balcony, champagne, a connection she'd tried to forget. But that was impossible. Nothing had happened between her and Marcus. They'd talked, nothing more. The timing was wrong anyway. She'd conceived months after the wedding, hadn't she? Chapter 4. Shadows of doubt, The genetic testing process dragged on for weeks, each day bringing fresh tension to the Whitfield household. James threw himself into work, often returning home late, while Emma found herself isolated in her growing anxiety. "I'm sure everything will be fine," her mother reassured her over lunch. "These medical tests are always finding something to worry about. In my day, we just had babies without all this fuss." Emma nodded absently, picking at her salad. She hadn't told her mother about the specific concerns raised by the testing. The implication of non-paternity was too humiliating to voice aloud. But the thought had taken up residence in her mind, growing alongside her baby, impossible to ignore. At 26 weeks, Emma stood before her full-length mirror, studying her changing body. Her belly was more pronounced now, though still relatively small for her stage of pregnancy. Placing her hands on either side of the rounded dome, she felt her son shift and roll beneath her palms. "You're going to be perfect," she whispered fiercely, "no matter what those tests say." The nursery was nearly complete, a serene space in subtle blues and greys, with custom furniture and hand-painted murals. James had spared no expense, even as emotional distance grew between them. It was as though he was hedging his bets, investing in this child while reserving judgment on its origins. When Dr. Patel finally called to schedule an appointment to discuss the comprehensive test results, Emma felt equal parts relief and dread. At least they would have answers. "I'll clear my calendar," James said, when she told him about the appointment. His tone was matter-of-fact, but Emma noticed the tightness around his eyes, the subtle clench of his jaw. They drove to the hospital in silence, the weight of unspoken fears filling the space between them. In Dr. Patel's office, Emma's hands trembled as she clutched her purse, while James sat unnaturally still beside her. Dr. Patel entered with a thick folder, her expression giving nothing away as she settled behind her desk. "Thank you both for coming in," she began. "I know this has been a stressful time." "Can we just get to the results?" James asked tersely. Dr. Patel nodded. "Of course. I've reviewed all the testing comprehensively, and I can confirm that your baby is developing normally with no indications of genetic disorders or health concerns." Emma exhaled sharply, relief washing over her. "That's wonderful news." "However," Dr. Patel continued carefully, "the genetic profile does present some significant anomalies that can't be explained by testing error." The momentary relief evaporated. Emma felt James stiffen beside her. "What kind of anomalies?" he demanded. Dr. Patel opened the folder, extracting several charts. "The fetal DNA shows genetic markers consistent with African ancestry that aren't present in either parent's genetic profile." The words hung in the air, devastating in their implication. "That's impossible," Emma whispered, blood rushing in her ears. "There must be some mistake." "We ran the tests multiple times to confirm," Dr. Patel said gently. "Based on the genetic evidence, Mr. Whitfield is not the biological father of this child." James stood abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. "And the biological father is what? Black?" Dr. Patel maintained her professional composure. "The genetic markers suggest the biological father has significant African ancestry. Yes." Emma felt the room spin around her. This couldn't be happening. It wasn't possible. Except the bachelorette party. Marcus. But they hadn't. She would remember if they had, wouldn't she? "I think we're done here," James said coldly, his voice seeming to come from far away. He turned to Emma, his blue eyes glacial. "We'll discuss this at home." The ride back to Beacon Hill was excruciating. James drove with mechanical precision, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, while Emma sat frozen beside him, mind racing. Once inside their home, James finally exploded. "How could you?" he demanded, his voice raw with fury. With whom? And when? During our engagement? Our marriage? Was it a one-time thing? Or have you been carrying on behind my back this entire time? James, I swear to you, I haven't, Emma began, tears streaming down her face. Don't lie to me, he roared, slamming his fist against the wall. The evidence is literally growing inside you. A black man, Emma. Was this some kind of rebellion against everything we stand for? His words stung, layered with implication. What we stand for? What exactly do you mean by that? You know damn well what I mean, James hissed. My family, our position in society. So this is about appearance? Emma interrupted, anger beginning to cut through her shock. About what people will think when I give birth to a baby who doesn't look like you? Don't twist this, James warned. You're the one who betrayed our vows. You're the one who's made a mockery of our marriage. I didn't. Emma stopped, the protest dying on her lips, because she honestly wasn't sure anymore. That night before the wedding was still hazy in parts, blurred by champagne and emotion. She remembered talking with Marcus on the balcony, his insightful words about masks and authenticity. Had there been more? Had she, in a moment of pre-wedding panic, sought comfort in a stranger's arms? She couldn't remember, and that terrified her. I need you out of this house, James said, his voice eerily calm now. Pack whatever you need for a few days. I need time to think. James, please. This isn't negotiable, Emma. Either you leave or I do, and this is my family's property. Emma stood there, one hand protective over her belly where their son, no, her son, kicked restlessly, sensing her distress. Where am I supposed to go? She asked quietly. That's not my concern right now, James replied. Call your mother. Call one of your bridesmaids. Call the father of your child for all I care. The cruelty of his words sliced through her. This man, whom she'd married for stability and security, was casting her aside at the first real test of their commitment. Fine, she said, straightening her spine. I'll go. But this is my child, James, regardless of biology. And I won't let you use this situation to divorce me with nothing, which is clearly what you're planning. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. Perhaps at her insight, perhaps at her sudden backbone. We'll let the lawyers sort that out, he said finally. You have an hour to pack. Upstairs, hands shaking with a mixture of fear, anger, and something like relief, Emma filled a suitcase with essentials. As she moved around the room that had never felt fully like hers, she caught sight of herself in the mirror, pale face streaked with tears, rounded belly protruding from her otherwise slender frame. It's just you and me now, she whispered to her unborn son. And we're going to be okay. She, called Melissa, giving her the barest outline of the situation. Marriage troubles, needed a place to stay for a few days. Her friend, now married with a toddler in the suburbs, immediately offered her guest room. Whatever you need, Em. No questions asked. An hour later, Emma walked out of the Beacon Hill brownstone with one suitcase and her purse, leaving behind the life she'd so carefully constructed. As her Uber pulled away from the curb, she didn't look back at the elegant facade of the house. Instead, she gazed ahead, one hand resting protectively on her belly, wondering what the future held for her and the child, whose existence had just upended everything. Chapter 5. Fractures and Foundations. Melissa's guest room became Emma's sanctuary for the next week, a neutral space where she could process the seismic shifts in her reality. Her friend, true to her word, asked no invasive questions, simply providing meals, companionship, and the occasional shoulder to cry on. He's asked for a paternity test, Emma told Melissa one evening as they sat on the back deck, watching Melissa's 3-year-old son play in the yard. As if the genetic testing wasn't definitive enough, Melissa sipped her wine, eyeing Emma's herbal tea with sympathy. What will you do? Take the test, I suppose, but it won't change the results. Emma rubbed her belly absently. It's so strange. I have no memory of being with anyone else. "The night before the wedding," Melissa said hesitantly. "You were pretty drunk, Em. We all were." Emma's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" Melissa set down her wine glass, looking uncomfortable. "I didn't think anything of it at the time. You and that dancer, Marcus, were talking on the balcony for ages. When I woke up around 3 a.m., your bed was empty." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. "That doesn't mean anything. Maybe I was in the bathroom or getting water." "Maybe," Melissa agreed too quickly. "Probably, even. Like I said, I didn't think anything of it." But the seed of doubt already planted by the genetic testing now took stronger root. Had something happened that night that she couldn't remember? Was it possible she'd betrayed James before they'd even exchanged vows? The paternity test, performed via a blood sample from Emma that could safely detect fetal DNA, confirmed what the genetic screening had already revealed. James was not the father of her child. Emma received the news in her lawyer's office, a stern woman named Catherine Liu, who had come highly recommended for high-profile divorces. "So what happens now?" Emma asked, numb. "Now we prepare for James to file for divorce," Catherine replied matter-of-factly. "Based on our preliminary discussions, he's likely to cite adultery as grounds, which Massachusetts still recognizes despite being a no-fault state." "But I don't even remember." Emma stopped herself. How pathetic would it sound to claim she couldn't remember being unfaithful? Catherine's expression softened slightly. "Emma, the why doesn't matter legally. The fact is, you're pregnant with another man's child. Our job now is to ensure you receive a fair settlement despite these circumstances." Fair? What was fair in this situation? Emma had entered the marriage in good faith. Even if she'd had reservations, she'd committed to building a life with James. Now everything was crumbling, and her child, this innocent being growing inside her, would be born into a storm of scandal and resentment. "I want to keep the gallery," Emma said suddenly. Through their marriage, she continued working part-time at a small art gallery in the South End, something James had tolerated as a harmless hobby. "The gallery is in your name," Catherine confirmed, checking her notes, "but it's been supported by Whitfield money. We'll have to negotiate that." Over the following weeks, as Emma entered her third trimester, the divorce proceedings began in earnest. James, through his lawyers, offered a settlement that was financially generous but emotionally cold. A lump sum payment in exchange for Emma, silence about the circumstances, a smaller monthly allowance for living expenses, and no contact between James and the child. "He's washing his hands of both of you," Catherine explained during a strategy session. "Frankly, given the circumstances, it's a fairly generous offer." Emma shook her head. "It feels wrong. This child is innocent in all this. The alternative is an ugly court battle that will become fodder for gossip columns," Catherine warned. "The Whitfields have considerable influence, Emma. They can make your life very difficult." Already, Emma had felt the chill of social isolation. Friends from their shared circle had stopped calling. Invitations dried up. Her own mother, horrified by the scandal, maintained a strained politeness that barely masked her disappointment. "He's never even asked about the baby," Emma said quietly. "Not once since the test results." Catherine sighed. "Some men can't separate the child from the circumstances of conception. It might be better for everyone if he maintains his distance." Perhaps she was right. But as Emma felt her son's movements growing stronger each day, she couldn't help but mourn the family life she'd imagined for him, a father, grandparents, a sense of belonging to something larger than himself. At 32 weeks, Emma finally secured a small apartment in Cambridge, using part of the initial settlement money James had provided. It was nothing like the Beacon Hill brownstone, just 2 bedrooms in a converted Victorian. But as she arranged her belongings and set up the nursery, it began to feel like home in a way the Whitfield house never had. On a crisp autumn afternoon, while unpacking books in the nursery, Emma came across her wedding album, somehow mixed in with other items during the hasty move from James's house. She sat heavily in the rocking chair, opening the leather-bound volume with trembling hands. There she was, radiant in white, standing beside James on the church steps. Both smiling, both playing their parts perfectly. Family and friends surrounded them, a tableau of social success. Emma flipped through the pages, noting how few candid moments there were, everything posed, everything perfect, until she reached the bachelorette party photos tucked into a pocket at the back of the album. Melissa must have added them as a surprise. Her breath caught as she found herself staring at an image of herself with Marcus. They sat on the hotel balcony, champagne glasses in hand, caught mid-conversation. The photographer, probably Melissa, had captured them from inside, through the glass doors. Emma was looking up at Marcus with an expression of rapt attention, while he gestured expressively, his face animated. There was something in that captured moment, a connection, an openness that was absent from every wedding photo that followed. Emma traced the outline of her face in the image, barely recognizing the woman who looked so engaged, so present, but there was nothing inappropriate in the photo, nothing to suggest what might have followed, nothing to explain the child she now carried. With a sigh, Emma closed the album and returned to unpacking. The past couldn't be changed, only accepted. Her focus needed to be on the future, and her son's. That evening, as she prepared for bed, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. Emma gasped, clutching the bathroom sink for support. When it passed, she took a deep breath, trying to remember what her birthing class instructor had said about Braxton Hicks contractions. False labor, nothing to worry about. But when a second pain came, more intense than the first, followed by a rush of fluid between her legs, Emma knew this was no false alarm. Her water had broken, 7 weeks before her due date. Hands shaking, she called an ambulance, then Melissa. As she waited, curled on her bed, through increasingly powerful contractions, Emma was struck by the loneliness of the moment. This wasn't how she'd imagined her child's birth, alone in an unfamiliar apartment, estranged from her husband, her family relationships strained. "Please wait," she whispered to her son. "You're not ready yet." But her baby had other plans. By the time the paramedics arrived, Emma's contractions were 3 minutes apart. At the hospital, despite efforts to halt the labor, her son's arrival proved unstoppable. "The baby's heartbeat is dropping with each contraction," the doctor explained urgently. "We need to deliver now." Everything after that became a blur of bright lights, urgent voices, and searing pain. Emma was vaguely aware of Melissa arriving, clutching her hand and offering encouragement. Then, after what seemed like hours of pushing, a new sound filled the room, the indignant cry of a tiny but determined human being. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, lifting the baby briefly for Emma to see before whisking him away to a waiting team of NICU specialists. In that fleeting moment, Emma registered several things at once. Her son was indeed a boy. He was alarmingly small, and his skin was several shades darker than her own. A beautiful golden brown that confirmed beyond any doubt what the genetic tests had already told them. This was not James Whitfield's son. "Is he okay?" Emma asked weakly, trying to see past the medical team surrounding her baby. "He's premature, but fighting," a nurse assured her. "The NICU team is getting him stabilized." Hours later, after Emma had been moved to a recovery room, a NICU doctor came to update her. Dr. Chen was petite and spoke with quiet authority. "Your son is doing remarkably well for a 33-week preemie," she said, showing Emma photos on her tablet. "He weighs just over 4 pounds, and his lungs need some support, but his other systems are functioning well." Emma stared at the images, her tiny son in an incubator, tubes and wires connecting his small body to various machines. Despite everything, fierce love surged through her. "When can I see him?" "We can take you to the NICU in a wheelchair once you're feeling stronger," Dr. Chen promised. "Have you thought of a name?" Emma hesitated. She and James had discussed names, all Whitfield family names, of course, but those no longer seemed appropriate. This child would never be a Whitfield in their eyes. "Noah," she said finally. "His name is Noah Richardson." Her maiden name, reclaimed. Dr. Chen smiled. "Noah is perfect. Rest now, and we'll arrange for you to meet him properly soon." Later that night, as Emma was wheeled into the hushed environment of the NICU, her heart pounded with anticipation and fear. Dr. Chen led her to an incubator where Noah lay, impossibly small yet perfectly formed. "You can touch him through these ports," the doctor explained, showing Emma the circular openings in the incubator's side. Tentatively, Emma reached in, placing her finger against Noah's tiny palm. Immediately, his fingers curled around hers. A reflex, she knew, but it felt like recognition, like acceptance. "Hello, Noah," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your mom." In that moment, looking at her son's perfect face, his delicate features a blend of her own and someone else's, Emma felt a clarity that had eluded her for months. Whatever confusion, whatever mistakes had led to Noah's conception, he was her miracle, her responsibility, her future. The past no longer mattered, only this tiny, fighting life before her, and the love already overflowing from her heart. Chapter 6. Unexpected Allies. Noah spent 3 weeks in the NICU, growing stronger each day. Emma practically lived at the hospital, returning to her apartment only to shower and change clothes. Melissa brought her meals and kept her company when she could, but with a toddler of her own, her time was limited. The divorce proceedings continued in Emma's absence, her lawyer handling most details. James had not contacted her, not even after news of Noah's premature birth reached him through mutual friends. His silence spoke volumes about the finality of their separation. On the day Noah was finally cleared to go home, weighing a healthier 5 pounds, Emma found herself flustered by the prospect of caring for him alone. The nurses had taught her the basics, feeding, diapering, recognizing signs of distress, but the reality of sole responsibility loomed large. "You've got this," assured Nurse Garcia, who had taken a special interest in Noah. "And remember, you can call us any time with questions." Emma nodded gratefully, securing Noah in his car seat with trembling hands. He looked even tinier, bundled in the going-home outfit Melissa had brought, a simple white sleeper that emphasized his golden-brown skin and the dark curls already forming on his head. As Emma wheeled Noah's car seat toward the hospital exit, a familiar figure rose from one of the waiting area chairs, causing her to stop short. "Mother?" Elizabeth Richardson approached cautiously, her gaze fixed on the car seat. "Melissa told me you were being discharged today." Emma tensed, instinctively protective. Her mother had been distant since the scandal broke, making her disapproval clear in subtle and not-so-subtle ways. Yes, Noah's finally strong enough to come home. Elizabeth hesitated, then asked softly, "May I see him?" After a moment's hesitation, Emma angled the car seat slightly, allowing her mother a view of the sleeping infant. Elizabeth's sharp intake of breath was audible. "He's beautiful, Emma." "Yes, he is," Emma agreed, watching her mother carefully. Elizabeth reached out a tentative hand, then withdrew it. I haven't been supportive. I was shocked and worried about what people would say. And now I'm looking at my grandson," Elizabeth said simply, "and nothing else seems to matter quite as much." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Would you like to come home with us? I could use the help." Her mother nodded, visibly relieved by the olive branch. "I'd like that very much." That afternoon in Emma's small apartment, Elizabeth proved surprisingly helpful, preparing meals while Emma navigated Noah's first home feeding. As they settled into an uneasy truce, Emma felt a glimmer of hope that her fractured family might heal around Noah's presence. "I've been thinking," Elizabeth said as they sat in the living room, Noah sleeping peacefully in his bassinet. "The guest house at our place is sitting empty. You and Noah could stay there until you find something more permanent." Emma looked up in surprise. The guest house on her parents' property was a charming cottage, much more suitable for a baby than her current apartment. "Are you sure?" "Your father would have wanted it," Elizabeth said firmly. "Family looks after family, Emma. Whatever has happened, Noah is family." 2 weeks later, Emma and Noah moved into the guest house, a stone's throw from the main residence where she'd grown up. The arrangement offered independence while providing a safety net of support that Emma increasingly valued as she adjusted to motherhood. James's lawyers finalized the divorce settlement, a generous lump sum, monthly support for 5 years, and the gallery ownership transferred fully to Emma. In exchange, Emma signed a non-disclosure agreement regarding the circumstances of their separation. The divorce would be officially recorded as irreconcilable differences. "It's more than fair," Catherine assured her. "You can provide well for Noah and yourself." Emma nodded, signing the papers without regret. That chapter of her life was closing, and though it hadn't ended as she'd expected, she couldn't bring herself to mourn what had fundamentally been a marriage of convenience rather than love. As Noah approached his 3-month milestone, thriving under Emma's care, an unexpected visitor appeared at the guest house door one Sunday afternoon. "Beatrice," Emma said, genuinely shocked to find her former mother-in-law on her doorstep. "What are you doing here?" Beatrice Whitfield looked uncomfortable but determined. "May I come in? I'd like to speak with you." Hesitantly, Emma stepped aside, leading Beatrice to the small living room where Noah was awake in his swing, kicking his legs energetically. Beatrice's eyes went immediately to the baby, widening slightly at the confirmation of what she'd undoubtedly heard. Noah's appearance made his parentage unmistakable. "James doesn't know I'm here," she said, still staring at Noah. "He wouldn't approve." "Why are you here, then?" Emma asked, moving to stand protectively near her son. Beatrice tore her gaze from Noah to look directly at Emma. "I lost a child. Did you know that? Before James, a daughter who lived only a few hours." Emma shook her head, surprised. James had never mentioned a sibling. "It was many years ago, but the pain never quite leaves you," Beatrice continued. "When I heard you'd given birth prematurely, that the baby, that Noah, had been in the NICU." She trailed off, composing herself. "Family is more than bloodlines, Emma. I've come to realize that." "James doesn't see it that way," Emma said quietly. "James is hurt and angry," Beatrice acknowledged. "But he may come around given time." Emma seriously doubted this but said nothing. "In the meantime," Beatrice continued, opening her handbag, "I've set up a trust for Noah. Regardless of biology, he was conceived during your marriage to my son, and I consider that to create a certain responsibility." She extended an envelope. "The details are in here. It's not contingent on anything. No required visitation, no name changes. Simply a provision for his future education and welfare." Emma stared at the envelope, stunned by the unexpected generosity. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept it for Noah's sake," Beatrice said simply, "and perhaps someday you'll allow me to know him a little." After a moment's hesitation, Emma took the envelope. "Thank you. And yes, I would never keep him from someone who wants to be part of his life." Beatrice nodded, satisfied. Then with a glance at Noah, she asked hesitantly, "May I hold him? Just once before I go?" Without waiting for a response, she moved to the swing and lifted Noah with practiced ease, cradling him against her expensive cashmere sweater without concern for potential spit-up. "Hello, young man," she murmured, studying his face. "You have your mother's eyes, did you know that?" Emma watched, throat tight with emotion, as this woman she'd always found intimidating gently rocked her son, humming a lullaby under her breath. In that moment, she glimpsed the humanity beneath Beatrice's carefully cultivated society persona, the woman who had lost a child, who valued family above appearances, despite her husband and son's opposing views. When Beatrice finally handed Noah back and prepared to leave, she paused at the door. James is his father's son in many ways, stubborn, traditional, concerned with legacy. But he has a good heart beneath it all. Don't give up on him entirely. Emma nodded, though she had little hope for reconciliation. "Thank you for coming, Beatrice." "Call me if you need anything," Beatrice said, surprising Emma again. "And perhaps I could visit occasionally?" "Of course," Emma agreed. "Noah can use all the loving adults in his life that he can get." After Beatrice left, Emma sat with Noah on her lap, contemplating the strange turns her life had taken. The woman she'd once feared disappointing had become an unlikely ally, while the man she'd married for stability had abandoned her at the first real challenge. Nothing had turned out as she'd planned or expected. Yet looking at Noah's peaceful face, she couldn't bring herself to regret the path that had brought him into her life, however mysterious and complicated it might be. That night, as she nursed Noah before bed, Emma found herself wondering about his biological father for the first time in months. Marcus, if he was indeed Noah's father, had no idea he had a son. Did he have the right to know? Did Noah have the right to know his biological father someday? These questions had no simple answers, but as Noah's tiny hand curled around her finger, Emma made a silent promise. She would always put his needs first, always be honest with him, and always ensure he knew how deeply he was loved, regardless of the circumstances of his birth. With that resolution, she placed her sleeping son in his crib and turned out the light, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. Chapter 7. Full Circle. 3 years passed in a blur of firsts, first steps, first words, first tantrums, first laughs. Noah grew into a vibrant, curious toddler with Emma's smile and intelligence combined with an athletic grace that must have come from his biological father. Emma had rebuilt her life around her son and her growing business. The gallery had thrived under her full ownership, expanding to represent emerging artists and becoming a respected fixture in Boston's art scene. She'd moved from her parents' guest house to a charming Victorian in Cambridge, creating a stable home for Noah filled with books, art, and love. James remained distant, though Beatrice visited regularly, doting on Noah in a way that surprised everyone who knew the formidable Whitfield matriarch. Elizabeth Richardson had also softened, becoming a devoted grandmother who happily babysit whenever Emma needed time for the gallery. The question of Noah's biological father remained unresolved. Emma had decided to wait until Noah was old enough to understand before pursuing that avenue, if she ever did. Some nights she still struggled with the blank space in her memory from the night before her wedding, the mystery of how Noah had come to be. On a bright spring morning, as Emma prepared for a major gallery opening featuring a promising new sculptor, her assistant Zoe burst into her office. "Emma, you need to see this." She thrust a copy of Boston magazine under Emma's nose, open to a feature article. Emma's eyes widened as she took in the headline, "Minds That Matter, Boston's Rising Stars in Psychology." And there, in a professional headshot that nonetheless captured his magnetic presence, was Marcus, Dr. Marcus Washington, now a prominent neuropsychologist at Massachusetts General Hospital, specializing in memory and trauma. "Isn't that—" Zoe began, having heard snippets of Emma's complicated past. "Yes," Emma interrupted, scanning the article with a racing heart. Marcus had completed his PhD, published groundbreaking research on memory formation during emotional events, and established a clinical practice helping patients recover from traumatic experiences. The coincidence seemed too significant to ignore. A memory expert, someone who might help her understand what had happened that night. "I need to reschedule my afternoon appointments," Emma said decisively. 3 hours later, she sat nervously in the waiting room of Dr. Washington's office at Mass General, having managed to secure a last-minute cancellation slot through a combination of determination and the Richardson name, which still carried weight in certain Boston circles. When the receptionist called her name, Emma's heart pounded so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. She followed the woman down a short hallway to an office with Marcus Washington, Ph.D., on the door. The man who rose from behind the desk was both familiar and different from her memories, more polished, perhaps, in his tailored suit and scholarly glasses, but with the same observant eyes and warm smile that had once made her confide her pre-wedding doubts. "Emma Richardson," he said, recognition immediately lighting his face. "Or is it Whitfield now?" "Richardson again, actually," she replied, accepting his offered handshake. His touch sent an unexpected current through her. "Please, sit down." Marcus gestured to a comfortable chair opposite his desk. "I have to admit, I was surprised to see your name on my calendar." "I imagine you would be," Emma said, gathering her courage. "It's been quite a while." 4 years, if I'm calculating correctly," Marcus said. "Your wedding was the spring before I completed my dissertation." Emma nodded, unsure how to broach the real reason for her visit. "I saw your feature in Boston Magazine. Congratulations on your success." "Thank you," Marcus replied, studying her carefully. "But I suspect you didn't schedule an appointment to discuss my career achievements." Direct. That's how she remembered him, seeing through social niceties to the heart of matters. Taking a deep breath, Emma decided to match his directness. "I need to ask you about the night before my wedding, the night of my bachelorette party." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, surprise, concern, perhaps both. "What specifically do you want to know?" "Did we—" Emma hesitated, then pushed forward. "Did anything happen between us that night? Anything intimate?" Marcus's expression shifted to one of genuine confusion. "No, absolutely not. We talked on the balcony for a couple of hours, about your doubts regarding the wedding, about authenticity, about the masks people wear. It was a deep conversation, but completely platonic." Emma felt both relief and deepening confusion wash over her. "You're certain?" "Completely certain," Marcus affirmed. "You were intoxicated, but not dangerously so. We talked, I gave you some advice about being true to yourself, and then I left. Your friends were all asleep by then." "So, after our conversation, you just left?" Emma pressed, trying to account for the hours Melissa had mentioned her bed was empty. Marcus hesitated, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Well, not immediately. You asked me to stay a little longer because you weren't ready to sleep. We went down to the hotel bar for coffee. You said you needed to sober up and think. We talked for maybe another hour, and then I walked you back to your suite. You thanked me. I wished you luck with whatever you decided about the wedding, and that was it." Emma slumped in her chair, processing this information. If nothing had happened with Marcus, then who was Noah's father? Had there been someone else that night she couldn't remember? "Emma, what's this about?" Marcus asked gently. "You seem distressed." She looked up at him, making a split-second decision to be completely honest. "I have a son. He's 3 years old. Genetic testing confirmed that my ex-husband isn't his father." Marcus's eyes widened. "And you thought I might be?" "The timing. There's a gap in my memory from that night. I just needed to know." "I understand," Marcus said, his professional demeanor returning. Memory gaps during emotional or intoxicated states aren't uncommon, but I can assure you nothing happened between us that would have resulted in a child. Emma nodded, both relieved and disappointed. She'd hoped for answers, but instead found only more questions. "Thank you for being honest with me," she said, rising to leave. "I appreciate your time." "Wait," Marcus said, standing as well. "This memory gap, is it something that concerns you? Professionally speaking, that's an area I might be able to help with." Emma hesitated. "What do you mean?" "There are therapeutic techniques that can sometimes help recover lost memories, especially those suppressed due to emotional trauma or substance effects," Marcus explained. "If it's important to you to understand what happened that night, perhaps I could help. As a professional, of course." The offer was tempting. For 3 years, Emma had lived with the mystery of Noah's conception, the blank space in her memory a constant source of unease. Would there be a conflict of interest since we knew each other? Marcus considered this. Normally, I might say yes, but our interaction was limited to one evening 4 years ago. I'd need to disclose our prior acquaintance in your file. But ethically, I believe I could still provide treatment if you're comfortable with it. Emma thought about Noah, growing so quickly, someday asking questions she couldn't answer. "I'd like to try," she decided. "If there's any chance of filling in those blanks, I want to take it." Over the following weeks, Emma attended regular sessions with Marcus, working through various memory recovery techniques, guided meditation, hypnotherapy, cognitive exercises designed to bypass emotional blocks. Progress was slow and fragmented. "I remember leaving the balcony," Emma reported during their 4th session, eyes closed as she worked through a guided visualization. "I remember suggesting we get coffee because I wasn't ready to face my thoughts alone." "Good," Marcus encouraged. "What about after the coffee?" "The walk back to your room," Emma concentrated, following the thread of memory. "You were a gentleman, kept a professional distance even though I was a bit flirty. I remember thinking you were different from the men in my social circle, more authentic. And when we reached your suite, I thanked you," Emma continued slowly. "You wished me luck. There was an awkward moment where it seemed like we might hug, but we didn't. You left. What did you do after I left?" Emma's brow furrowed as she pushed deeper into the hazy recollection. "I went inside. My friends were all asleep. I felt restless. I couldn't sleep." "What did you do about that restlessness?" A flash of memory. Emma gasped. "I left again. I took the elevator down. I wanted to walk, to think." "You left the hotel?" Marcus asked, careful to keep his tone neutral. "Yes. No. I went to the hotel bar first. It was nearly empty, just the bartender and—" Emma's eyes flew open. There was someone else there, someone I knew. "Who was it, Emma?" She shook her head, the memory slipping away. "I can't see them clearly. Just a silhouette at the bar." Though frustrated by the breakthrough that stopped short of revelation, Emma felt they were making progress. "Same time, next week," she confirmed as she prepared to leave. Marcus nodded, then hesitated. "I was wondering, purely for contextual purposes that might help our work, if I might see a photo of your son. Sometimes visual cues can trigger associated memories." Emma hesitated only briefly before pulling out her phone and showing him a recent picture of Noah at the park, his wide smile displaying missing front teeth, his curly hair catching the sunlight. Marcus stared at the photo, an unreadable expression crossing his face. "He's a beautiful boy," he said finally. "He has your smile." "Thank you," Emma replied, tucking the phone away. "He's the best thing that's ever happened to me, regardless of how he came to be." As she left his office, Emma didn't notice Marcus reaching for his own phone with a troubled expression, or hear him making a call the moment she was out of earshot. The following week, Emma arrived for her appointment to find Marcus unusually tense. "Before we begin," he said after she'd settled in the therapy chair, "there's something I need to discuss with you." Emma nodded, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "After seeing Noah's photo last week, I had some concerns." Marcus began carefully. "The resemblance to someone I know was striking." Emma's heart began to race. "What are you saying?" "I made some inquiries," Marcus continued. "Discreetly, of course. Emma, do you recall anything about your ex-husband's groomsman, particularly his best man?" Emma frowned, confused by this apparent tangent. "Daniel McCarthy, James's roommate from Harvard. What about him? Did you interact with him much during your engagement or the wedding preparations?" "Not particularly," Emma said, trying to follow Marcus's thought process. "He traveled a lot for work, international finance or something. He was in and out of Boston. I probably only met him a handful of times before the wedding." Marcus took a deep breath. "Daniel McCarthy has a younger brother named Jason. They're half-brothers, actually, with different fathers. Jason's father is Nigerian." Emma stared at him, the implications slowly dawning. "Are you saying Jason McCarthy was at your hotel the night before your wedding?" Marcus said quietly. He'd just returned from a business trip and was meeting Daniel for a drink to discuss the wedding schedule. Daniel was running late, so Jason waited at the bar. "The silhouette at the bar," Emma whispered, fragmented memories suddenly coalescing. "We recognized each other. He'd been at the engagement party. We started talking." "Emma, Jason McCarthy is Noah's father," Marcus said gently. "I'm certain of it. He's a colleague. We serve on a hospital ethics committee together. The resemblance between him and Noah is unmistakable." Emma sat in stunned silence, memories flooding back in a disorienting rush. Jason McCarthy, Daniel's charming younger brother, who'd offered a sympathetic ear as she'd poured out her pre-wedding anxieties. The drinks they'd shared as the bartender looked on with disapproval. The impulsive decision to take a bottle of whiskey up to the empty conference room on the hotel's top floor, with its panoramic view of Boston. What had been meant as a momentary escape from wedding pressure had turned into hours of intimate conversation and eventually a physical connection that both had immediately recognized as a terrible mistake. "We agreed never to speak of it," Emma said, the memory now painfully clear. "He was leaving for London the next morning. He made me promise not to call off the wedding because of one drunken mistake. He said it would ruin his brother's friendship with James, damage too many relationships." "And you kept that promise," Marcus observed. "You went through with the wedding." Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I buried it so deeply I convinced myself it never happened. How is that even possible?" "The mind has powerful defense mechanisms," Marcus explained softly, "especially when confronted with actions that fundamentally conflict with our self-image. You saw yourself as loyal, responsible, appropriate. This incident contradicted everything you believed about yourself, so your mind simply filed it away." "Does he know?" Emma asked suddenly. "Jason, does he know about Noah?" Marcus shook his head. "He mentioned having a complicated history with someone from his brother's social circle years ago, but he has no idea there was a child. He moved to London permanently after your wedding and only recently returned to Boston for a position at Mass General." Emma sat in silence, processing this revelation. After years of not knowing, of wondering, the truth was finally clear and more complicated than she could have imagined. "What do I do now?" she asked quietly. "That's entirely your decision," Marcus replied. "Ethically, I can't contact Jason directly about this, given our professional relationship and my role as your therapist, but if you want to reach out to him, I can provide his contact information." "And if I don't? If I decide Noah and I are better off without further complications?" Marcus considered this. That's also your right. But speaking not as your therapist, but as someone who's observed Noah's father professionally, Jason is a good man, Emma. Brilliant pediatric surgeon, volunteers at community clinics, genuinely cares about his patients. Like father, like son, Emma said softly, thinking of Noah's natural empathy, how he always comforted other children when they were hurt or sad. There's one more thing you should know, Marcus added hesitantly. Jason isn't married, has no children, at least none that he's aware of. Family is important to him. He speaks often of his Nigerian father's emphasis on legacy and connection. The implication was clear. Jason McCarthy might want to know his son, might welcome Noah into his life, if given the chance. Emma closed her eyes, emotions warring within her. After 3 years of single motherhood, of building a life for herself and Noah alone, the prospect of involving his biological father was daunting. Yet didn't Noah deserve to know his heritage, his complete identity? I need time to think, she said finally. Marcus nodded understandingly. Of course. This is a lot to process. As Emma left his office, her mind swirled with possibilities, fears, and a strange sense of relief. The mystery that had haunted her for years was solved, though the path forward remained uncertain. For days, she wrestled with her decision, weighing Noah's needs against her own fears. She consulted with her mother, with Beatrice, who surprised Emma with her supportive stance, and finally with her own heart. 1 week later, Emma sat in a quiet cafe near the hospital, her heart pounding as she checked her watch for the 10th time. She'd called Jason McCarthy directly, asking for a brief meeting without explaining why. His voice on the phone had been cautious, but curious. Yes, he remembered her. Of course he would meet her. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and Emma looked up to see a tall, distinguished man entering, scanning the room. Jason McCarthy had aged well in the 4 years since their encounter, a few silver threads in his dark hair only adding to his dignified appearance. When his eyes found her, recognition and uncertainty crossed his face in equal measure. "Emma," he said as he approached her table. "This is unexpected. Thank you for coming," she replied, gesturing to the chair opposite her. "I appreciate you making time." "Of course," Jason said, settling himself somewhat stiffly. "Though I admit, I'm curious about the reason for this meeting after all this time." Emma took a deep breath. "There's someone I'd like you to meet," she said, removing a photo from her purse and sliding it across the table. "Your son." Jason's expression shifted from confusion to shock as he stared at the photo of Noah, recognition dawning in his eyes as he took in features that mirrored his own. "My son?" he whispered, looking up at Emma with a mixture of disbelief and wonder. "His name is Noah," Emma said gently. "He's 3 years old, brilliant, kind, and has your smile." "How?" Jason began, then shook his head. "I mean, of course I know how, but you were married to James." "Genetic testing during the pregnancy revealed James wasn't the father," Emma explained. "It ended our marriage." Jason closed his eyes briefly, regret etched on his features. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I had no idea." "I didn't either, until the test results," Emma admitted. "I'd buried that night so deeply, convinced myself it never happened. Yet here we are," Jason said, looking again at Noah's photo. "And here he is." "Yes," Emma agreed. "Here we are." Jason met her gaze directly. "What do you want from me, Emma? Financial support? Because I would gladly—" "No," she interrupted. "We're fine financially. What I want, what I'm offering, is the chance for you to know your son, if that's something you want." Jason's expression softened. "Is that really a question? Of course I want to know him." "It would have to be gradual," Emma cautioned. "He's only 3, and he's never had a father figure. This would be a big adjustment." I understand, Jason nodded. We could take it as slowly as necessary. I can't believe I have a son. Emma smiled tentatively. He has your eyes. And apparently your aptitude for medicine. His pediatrician says he's never seen a 3-year-old so interested in how the stethoscope works. Jason laughed, a warm sound full of emotion. My father would be so proud. In Nigerian culture, grandchildren are considered the greatest blessing. Is your father still living? Emma asked. Yes, in Baltimore now. He'd love to meet Noah someday. Jason hesitated. If that's something you'd be open to, of course. One step at a time, Emma advised. First, you should meet Noah. Then we'll see where this journey takes us. As they continued talking, planning a careful introduction that would prioritize Noah's emotional well-being, Emma felt a weight lifting that she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. The circle that had begun on that fateful night before her wedding was finally closing, making way for a new beginning, not the one she'd ever planned or expected, but perhaps exactly the one she and Noah needed. Chapter 8. A New Beginning 1. Month later, Emma sat on a park bench watching as Noah explored the playground with typical toddler enthusiasm. The early summer sun warmed her face as she checked her watch again. Jason would be arriving any minute for their carefully planned first meeting. They decided on the park as neutral territory, a place where Noah could be comfortable and the interaction could remain casual. Emma had prepared Noah by explaining that Mommy's friend would be joining them for playground time. No pressure, no expectations, just a simple introduction. Emma? She looked up to find Jason standing nearby, appearing both eager and nervous. He wore casual clothes, jeans and a polo shirt, and carried a small gift bag. Jason? She smiled, rising to greet him. You made it. Wouldn't miss it for anything, he replied, his eyes already scanning the playground for Noah. Is that him on the slide? Emma nodded, watching as Noah descended with a squeal of delight. Noah, she called, come say hello to Mommy's friend. Noah looked over, hesitated momentarily as he registered the stranger, then trotted over with the openness only children possess. He stopped before Jason, looking up with curious eyes that were eerily similar to the man's own. Hello, Noah said. I'm Noah Richardson. I'm 3. Hello, Noah, Jason replied, crouching to the boy's level. I'm Dr. Jason. It's very nice to meet you. You're a doctor? Noah asked, instantly interested. Like Dr. Chen, who fixes my tummy aches. Similar, Jason smiled. I fix children's hearts. Noah's eyes widened. Real hearts? The ones that go boom boom inside? Exactly those ones, Jason confirmed seriously. The most important job in the world is helping hearts work properly. Emma watched their interaction with a lump in her throat. There was something surreal about seeing them together, father and son, connected by blood yet strangers to each other. The physical resemblance was striking, but even more so was the similar way they tilted their heads when curious, the matching intensity in their expressions. I brought you something, Jason said, offering the small gift bag. Your mom said it was okay. Noah accepted the bag eagerly, peering inside to find a child-sized doctor's kit, complete with stethoscope, reflex hammer, and other basic tools. Wow! He exclaimed, immediately pulling out the stethoscope. Can I hear your heart? Of course, Jason agreed, guiding the earpieces into Noah's ears and helping him position the chest piece correctly. Noah's face transformed with wonder as he heard the steady beating. It's talking to me, he whispered reverently. Hearts do talk in their own way, Jason agreed. They tell us a lot if we know how to listen. The rest of the afternoon passed in a natural rhythm, with Noah gradually including Jason in his play, showing off his climbing skills, demanding races to the swings, and eventually asking if Dr. Jason could come over to see his room sometime. If your mum says it's okay, Jason replied, looking to Emma for guidance. Maybe next time, she suggested, noting Noah's comfortable interaction with Jason. It was a promising start. As the sun began to set, Noah's energy finally flagged, and Emma announced it was time to head home for dinner. "Will you come back to the park with us, Dr. Jason?" Noah asked hopefully. Jason glanced at Emma, who nodded slightly. "I would love to, Noah," he said, "if that's okay with your mom." "Saturday?" Emma suggested. "We usually come here in the mornings." "Saturday it is," Jason agreed, looking as though he'd just been offered the greatest gift imaginable. As they prepared to leave, Noah surprised everyone by spontaneously hugging Jason's legs. "Bye, Dr. Jason. Thank you for my doctor kit." Jason's eyes met Emma's over Noah's head, emotion evident in his expression. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. Emma nodded, her own eyes misting. This was just the beginning of a long, complex journey, but seeing Noah's immediate comfort with Jason confirmed she'd made the right decision in reaching out. Over the following months, Jason became a regular part of their lives, first through playground visits and casual outings, then through dinners at Emma's home, and eventually overnight stays where he read Noah bedtime stories and helped with bath time. The transition wasn't without challenges. Noah occasionally tested boundaries, as children do when family dynamics shift. There were moments of jealousy, confusion, and the inevitable, "Why don't you live with us?" questions that required patient, age-appropriate explanations. "Sometimes grown-ups meet in the wrong order," Emma explained during one such conversation. "Dr. Jason and I met before we were ready to be a family." "But you're ready now?" Noah asked hopefully. Emma and Jason exchanged glances across the kitchen table. Their relationship had evolved into a deep friendship and co-parenting partnership, but both were cautious about rushing into anything more. "We're ready to be your parents together," Jason answered carefully. "That doesn't always mean living in the same house, but it always means loving you and putting you first." Noah seemed to accept this explanation, though Emma suspected the questions would return as he grew older and his understanding of family structures deepened. By Noah's 4th birthday, they had established a comfortable routine. Jason spent weekends at Emma's home, and one evening during the week, maintaining his own apartment nearby. They celebrated holidays together, with both Emma's mother and Beatrice Whitfield, who had surprised everyone by embracing Jason warmly, included in family gatherings. The most significant milestone came 6 months after Jason's first meeting with Noah, when Emma finally agreed it was time to tell their son the full truth about their relationship. "Noah," Jason began as they sat together in the cozy reading nook of Noah's bedroom, "do you know what makes a daddy?" Noah considered this seriously. "A daddy is a boy grown up who takes care of kids and loves them a lot." "That's right," Jason nodded. "And sometimes a daddy helps make a baby with a mommy." "Like planting seeds," Noah offered, drawing on his recent gardening experience at preschool. "Very similar," Emma agreed, smiling at the apt comparison. "And the baby grows inside the mommy until it's ready to be born." "I grew inside you," Noah stated confidently. "You told me that story." "You did," Emma confirmed. "And what we want to tell you today is that Dr. Jason is the one who helped make you. He's your daddy." Noah's eyes widened as he looked between them, processing this information. "You're my real daddy?" he asked Jason directly. "I am," Jason confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know about you when you were born, or I would have been there from the beginning. But I'm here now, and I'll always be your daddy." Noah was quiet for a long moment, then asked simply, "Can I call you Daddy instead of Dr. Jason?" Jason gathered Noah into a fierce hug, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "I would love that more than anything in the world." As Emma watched them embrace, her own tears flowing freely, she marveled at the journey that had brought them to this point. From a moment of weakness before a wedding that should never have happened, to the painful dissolution of that marriage, to the unexpected joy of finding Noah's father and building a new kind of family, nothing had gone according to plan, yet somehow everything had worked out as it should. Later that evening, after Noah had been tucked into bed with both parents' kisses on his forehead, Emma and Jason sat on her back deck, sharing a bottle of wine under the stars. "I never imagined this," Jason admitted, swirling the wine in his glass. "When you called me that day, I was terrified you were going to tell me about some disease you'd contracted from our encounter or demand an explanation for my behavior. The last thing I expected was a son." "Life rarely goes as expected," Emma replied. "If someone had told me 4 years ago that my bachelorette party would eventually lead to this moment, I would have thought they were insane." "Speaking of that night," Jason said hesitantly, "I've always wanted to apologize properly. My behavior was inexcusable. You were intoxicated, about to be married." "We were both responsible," Emma interrupted gently. "I was having serious doubts about marrying James, looking for an escape or a sign that I should back out. You were convenient, but I was fully involved in the decision." Jason nodded, accepting her perspective. "Still, I left the next morning for London feeling like the worst person alive, brother's friend's bride, of all the cliches. And I walked down the aisle knowing I'd betrayed my fiancé before we'd even exchanged vows," Emma countered. "Neither of us behaved admirably, but look what came from it." She gestured toward Noah's bedroom window. "I can't regret anything that brought him into this world." "Nor can I," Jason agreed, "though I do wish I'd known sooner. Those first 3 years, we can't get them back," Emma said softly, "but we have all the years ahead." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the evening breeze carrying the scent of Emma's garden roses. "I've been offered a permanent position as chief of pediatric cardiology," Jason said eventually. "I've decided to accept." "That's wonderful," Emma said sincerely. "Noah will be thrilled you're staying permanently." "It means I'll be even busier for a while as I establish the program," Jason warned. "But it also means security, permanence. I'm not leaving Boston again, not while Noah is here." Emma nodded, appreciating his commitment. "We'll make it work. He understands his daddy saves hearts for a living." "Speaking of hearts," Jason said, setting down his wine glass and turning to face her fully, "there's something else I've been wanting to discuss with you." Emma raised an eyebrow, noting his suddenly serious tone. "These past months, getting to know Noah, and getting to know you again, properly this time, have been the happiest of my life," Jason began. "I know we agreed to focus on co-parenting, on building a stable environment for Noah without complicating things between us." "We did," Emma agreed cautiously. "But I think there's something here worth exploring," Jason continued. "A connection that goes beyond our shared love for Noah. I'm not suggesting we rush into anything, but perhaps we could consider a real date. Just the two of us, getting to know each other as we are now, not as we were that night 4 years ago." Emma studied his face, the sincerity in his eyes, the nervous set of his mouth. She couldn't deny the attraction she felt, the growing affection that had developed as they navigated parenthood together. But she'd been down this road before, rushing into a relationship for reasons that had nothing to do with love. "We have all the time in the world," she said finally. "Let's start slowly. Dinner, just the two of us. No expectations, no pressure. We'll see where it leads." Jason's smile was radiant. "That's all I'm asking for. A chance." As they sealed their agreement with a gentle kiss, their first since that fateful night, Emma felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This wasn't the ending she'd once imagined for herself, nor was it truly an ending at all, but rather a beginning, unexpected, unplanned, and all the more precious for it. 1 year later, on a perfect summer day, Emma stood on the same beach where she'd honeymooned with James, watching as Noah and Jason built an elaborate sandcastle at the water's edge. But this time, she wore no wedding ring, followed no prescribed social script, lived by no one's expectations but her own. She and Jason had taken things slowly, building a relationship based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine love rather than convenience or obligation. They maintained separate residences while spending most of their time together, creating a blended family life that worked for all of them. Noah, now 5 and thriving, accepted their unconventional family structure with the adaptability of childhood. He split his time between mommy's house and daddy's apartment, proudly introducing Jason to his kindergarten class on career day and beaming with joy when both parents attended school functions together. Beatrice Whitfield remained a doting presence in Noah's life, hosting him for occasional weekend visits that always seemed to coincide with educational exhibitions or enrichment activities. James had eventually remarried, a woman from an equally prestigious family who quickly provided the Whitfield heir his parents had always wanted. Emma's gallery continued to flourish, now expanding to a second location that specialized in emerging artists from diverse backgrounds. Jason's pediatric cardiology program was revolutionizing care for children with congenital heart defects, his research garnering international attention. They were, by any measure, successful, professionally, personally, as parents. But more importantly, they were authentic, living lives aligned with their true selves rather than external expectations. As Emma watched Jason and Noah laughing together, their matching smiles radiant in the sunshine, she reflected on the strange path that had brought them here. A bachelorette party, a moment of weakness, a child born of an encounter that should never have happened, yet had resulted in the greatest joy she'd ever known. Life, she had learned, rarely followed the careful plans one made. Sometimes it was the unexpected detours, the mistakes and missteps that led to the truest happiness. And sometimes what looked like an ending was merely the first step toward a beginning you never could have imagined. Noah looked up, catching her watching them. "Mom, come see our castle. Dad made a moat with a working drawbridge." Emma smiled, kicking off her sandals to join her family at the water's edge. "I'm coming," she called, walking toward the future she'd never planned but wouldn't trade for anything in the world.